Have you ever wondered what would happen if all of a sudden one day you received a promotion? Your boss comes to you and says, hey, guess what? You're in charge. And they put you in charge of the department that you're currently working in, or maybe another department in the company. Sound kind of odd? It actually happens quite frequently. Sometimes, if you have the luxury, you kind of have an idea that you might be up for promotion. Oftentimes, it can happen because other situations around you take place first and you're the next in line. Today, I'm going to talk to all of you about what happens when all of a sudden you find yourself running the show. Now, that might not mean you're running the entire company. It might just mean you're all of a sudden running the team that you used to be a part of. Or maybe you've been elevated to the department head. My situation, way back when I first started working for the consumer products company that I started with, way back in 1979, I was 27 years old, and all of a sudden, a guy that was running a district that I used to live in back in the Washington, D.C. area up and quit. Well, guess what? The only person in the region that knew that market was me. At the time, I was down in Raleigh, North Carolina on a management assignment, and all of a sudden I found myself coming back to my home backyard and running a $14 million business with a team of 8. Did I know what I was doing when I stepped into that? Absolutely not. But was I excited about the opportunity? Yes. So I'm going to help you through some of the things that you really should be looking for if all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where you're now having to make decisions and oversee other people's work. There's actually a couple of things that you can do to prepare yourself and in about 30 days be up and running to a point where you feel confident and people understand who's in charge. So the 3 things I'm going to talk to you today about are changing your thinking, changing how you show up, meaning how you interact, and being in the know. Those 3 areas can do more than just about anything else. And I'm even talking about people who might get promoted after being in a company for a short period of time and haven't really understood the nuances of the company that are there. I've seen that happen before. I've actually helped people in situations where they've been in those situations and they feel completely like a fish out of water because all of a sudden they're in a position of having to make decisions and having to call the shot, and they don't really feel like they know as much as everybody else on the team. Let's talk about changing your thinking. One of the things that I found that fairly new managers or people that move into leadership roles don't stop and think about is the fact of how has my role changed? Before I was a member of the team, I had a particular responsibility and duties and tasks and things I had to accomplish, but it was all about me. The more I did well, the more I showed up and contributed and did things that were basically a function of my role, the better I looked. Maybe the more I made, depending on the kind of work you're in. You now move into a management role, it's not about you anymore. Now you've got to change your thinking from me to we. Now you've got to look at the entire team that you've been asked to oversee and direct and help make sure they fulfill what they're supposed to be doing for the company. And you've got to start thinking about how everybody's operating in that. So that's the first thing. Really sit back and think about how your role has changed and how you've got to change your thinking in order to acclimate to that. The other thing that I found too is that fairly new managers seem to walk into these higher levels that they're now being thrown into, thinking that they have to have all the answers. When somebody comes to them with a question, they have to know what that is. They have to be able to provide the solution. No. In fact, most of the time, you're probably not in a position early on to be able to provide answers unless you've been involved in some situation as a peer, and now you can look back on that and say, yeah, I know what I did then. This is kind of what you should do. But most of the time, stressing yourself out over having to know all the answers for whatever somebody might come to you for is a killer. The best thing you can do is recognize that now it's your job to harness the collective intelligence, the wisdom, the experience of the team, the department, the location that you're overseeing. Most of the time, the folks that might be below you or maybe operating at a floor level probably know infinitely more about that situation than you do. Get good at finding out who has the answers and talking with them. That's the role of a leader. Figure out where the resources are that can provide the solution. It doesn't have to be you. All right? So thinking that way can help you really slide into an elevated role with a little more confidence. Now, here's another one. I had to learn this the hard way. It's more important to be respected than it is to be liked. And I find this quite a bit with some of the female clients that I've had over the years. They're just as smart, they're just as experienced, they're just as creative at what they do, but they walk into these expanded or elevated roles thinking they have to maintain the friendships of the people that they were working with before. And I'm not saying burn them all to the ground, not at all. I'm just saying you have to change from now doing things based on likability to now doing things based on respect. Not everybody that works for you has to like you, but they have to respect you. They have to know that you know enough about where you're going with the department or how you're connected with the rest of the company to always put them in a situation where they can win. If they don't feel like they're winning and they look at you because they don't think you know what you're doing, your respect goes right down the toilet. So think about that really hard, because I'll tell you where that'll show up. That'll show up when you start making hard decisions. In fact, I wrote a book a couple of years ago, a very short one called Leadership Axioms. And it was 14 principles that if you adopt, your leadership capability and your ability to influence and impact your organization will be incredibly improved. One of the things I talk about in there is this very thing of being liked versus being respected. And it shows up whenever you're starting to make tough decisions. People that make tough decisions for the right reason, others might not like the decision they made in the moment, but they'll respect it. If you make a decision based on liked and it doesn't work out, that doesn't work very well at all. So remember that liked is important in your social circles. Respect is ultimate in your business circles. Finally, you have to start thinking from a department focus to more of a company focus. Let's say you're in accounting, or you're in customer service, or you're in some other area that's fairly contained within the company. Depending on how long you've been there, you can get to the point where your world is that department. The things that you do within that department are the whole stop and start to the reason you're coming to work. Now that you're overseeing that department and you're having to work with other departments around you, you've got to have a greater worldview of what's going on, and it has to go way beyond the department. You now got to start looking at the company and what the company's doing and how that department fits into that company and what other departments maybe are affected by what you do. When you start thinking that way, kind of globally, when you start thinking globally about your role in the various department or team or other location that you might be managing, it makes you more holistic in how you make decisions and how you guide others and how you hold people accountable to the things that they do. It's very, very important, and it all boils down to how you think about the role that you now find yourself sitting in.